Sio to God, hello all, it's afternoon, good afternoon, and Wado. Thank you for watching. This is day 36 of Transformation of America, a true life story of a CIA mind control slave by Kathy O'Brien with Mark Phillips, and we are in chapter 12 of Kathy's story, and hopefully I can just rush through that to get into chapter 13. Back on Stirrup Cay, Houston was anxiously waiting to begin transporting the cocaine back to the party area of the island. Their NCL workers were cleaning up for the cruise from the cruise ship's beach party cookout, which was NCL's excuse to stop the ship. After I muled the very first heavy load of cocaine in my tote sacks, Houston approached one worker familiar with the drug operation and informed him we had a heavier load than usual and needed to make another trip. The worker directed us to the huge empty food container used for transporting cookout supplies from the ship and gave us the key. We locked the first load in the container and I took my empty tote sacks plus another straw bag back for another haul. With the second load, Houston even carried some cocaine himself. We had to run quite a distance through the island woods in an attempt to make it back to the ship's shuttle before scheduled departure time. When we arrived, the beach was nearly deserted as all the passengers had been taken back to the ship. All that remained was the food container and the NCL worker who was hurrying us onto the shuttle and on board the ship, which was waiting for us. When the cruise ship docked at the port of Miami, Puerto Rican drug lord and CIA operative Jose Busto was acting as U.S. immigrations officer, commissioned by the Drug Enforcement Agency through the CIA, which he often did for NCL. Busto helped us clear ship undetected with the large load of cocaine. The drugs were packed with suitcases, then loaded into Houston's specially made motorhome, which was parked in NCL's guarded, restricted parking lot. Most of the cocaine was dropped off as usual at Warner Robins Air Force Base in Macon, Georgia, to be distributed to destinations unknown to me. The money generated by the sale of cocaine was supposedly used to fund a major arms shipment into Saudi Arabia. These weapons were reportedly distributed among several neighboring countries. The profits were then relayed into Reagan's Contra cause. A large quantity of cocaine was retained by Houston for his own use and delivery for personal profit through his country music industry contacts. Some of the cocaine would be delivered to me and Saudi Arabian Ambassador Prince Bandar bin Sultan, Bandarbin Sultan, FAHD, FAHD, own homing pigeon, I carried a message from Warner Robins Air Force Base in addition to the message from Noriega agreeing to FAHD's terms back to Dick Cheney at the Pentagon. Cheney then prepared me for the final phase of the operation. This was meeting with Prince Bandar, who Cheney, Houston, and others referred to as Sultan, in Nashville, Tennessee, where he often visited corrupt friends. There, I would relay a message of agreement to FAHD's terms between Noriega and the U.S., as well as confirm all Air Force flights, carrier pigeons, and bank transactions. In turn, FAHD's homing pigeon would relay the messages to FAHD so that the seemingly long-running drugs for arm deals would draw to a successful conclusion. Dick Cheney cautioned me Sultan will be in Nashville having dinner with friends at the Stockyard. The Stockyard was a popular country music dinner club known for its CIA criminal covert activity involvement. Cheney glanced at the list on his desk and continued, among others, those friends would be Mayor Fulton and Sheriff Thomas. They are considered a threat to the operation. They're not discreet. Thomas, in particular, is not to be trusted. He's an ass and too crooked. So Sultan must leave the table before the message is delivered. Any questions? Good. I certainly had no questions this time. I did not need him to caution me about Nashville's Mayor Richard Fulton, whom Houston had prostituted me to, and Sheriff Fate Thomas, F-A-T-E, and then Thomas. I had known the pair for years, had been cautioned about them before, and had no respect for them at all. Together, Thomas and Fulton had indiscreetly perpetuated the total corruption that had permeated Nashville's $2.8 billion country music industry, which ran the city of Nashville. They ran the city's business from a bar, the Stockyard, while they drank and openly used cocaine. If I had had the capacity to wonder, I would have wondered what a homing pigeon, so critical to the conclusion of this international criminal covert operation, was doing with such a low-level sleaze. As it was, I could only sense relief at not having to deal with them too. Prince Bandar bin Sultan's reputation for sex and drugs was widely known in Nashville, but much of my information pertaining to his activities came from one of my closest Project Monarch friends. She is an entertainer's daughter who was prostituted regularly to Sultan when he was in town, which was often. When Cheney was through with me, Byrd escorted me to the White House to see Reagan, who also cautioned me about the prince. Reagan was aware of Habib's having activated me sexually with King Fahd and made it clear that my scheduled rendezvous with Prince Bandar would not include the usual sex. Reagan joked in Byrd's presence, Byrd's, and in brackets it says BYRDS, may well be eaten by a kitten, Reagan's pet name for me, but not homing pigeons. Homing pigeons taste foul. Bird laughed. Reagan continued. Homing pigeons have one purpose: passing messages. Throughout history, world leaders have passed messages to and from each other by way of pigeons, messages that have set the course of events, that have altered the course of history. Homing pigeons are loyal and dedicated to their task, flying overseas yet never pausing long enough to even quench their thirst, given no thought to their own needs. When a pigeon is released, he takes a direct course to his destination, dedicated to delivering the very messages on which history was founded. Why even Noah relied on a pigeon to traverse the seas to bring back a message of hope? It is your duty to attach an added message to the homing pigeon, one of peace from our homeland to his, one from the President of the United States of King Fahd of Saudi Arabia, omitted due to international ramification. Bird, that was in brackets. Bird was visibly inspired by the speech. I was literally saved by the bell from another boring, long-winded recitation that Reagan had just inspired in Bird. When Cheney telephoned me back to his office, it was still morning, and Cheney had appeared very busy, hurried, and irritable when I had seen him just a short time earlier. My heart was heavy in expectant anticipation of the physical and sexual brutality Cheney's moods normally incited. Yet I was relieved to escape the torturous picture painting competition that experience had taught me Bird and Reagan were about to embark on. My heart lightened when the escort left me at Cheney's office, and I noticed his foul mood had changed dramatically. I understand you ordered me to report in, sir. Cheney looked up from his desk where he was shuffling through papers and tying up loose ends before leaving his office. Sit down, he ordered. I just got word that the genie in the bottle castaway operation is complete, and I intend to pop a cork or two of my own in celebration of its successful conclusion. I have time on my hands and want you to join me. The bunkhouse is being prepared. Cheney apparently thought of something, went to the door and told the guy who had escorted me, make sure there's some Wonderland wafers in the bunkhouse. He walked to his desk, picked up the phone, and said, I'm out of here. Into it and slammed it down. I followed Cheney out the door, and we turned to the right rather than the left outside his office and walked to his personal quarters, referred to as the bunkhouse. It was decorated in Cheney's Western style in browns and tans with leather furniture. There was no food, maybe some nuts stashed somewhere, but plenty of bottles of alcohol. I was swollen and bleeding vaginally. The bottom of my shirt was soaked in blood, and my belly hurt deep inside when my escort finally came for me early the next morning. Staying around Cheney while he slept was as deadly a mistake as removing his clothes or questioning him. It was forbidden. This time he broke his own rule and did not even punish me for it when morning arrived. He had spent so many hours drinking alcohol and using his enormous member as an assault weapon that he passed out shortly before my escort arrived. As I walked into the hall, I doubled over from pain. My escort turned to Cheney and remarked, Christ, Cheney. Cheney lifted his head and proudly slurred, now you know why they call it DICK. Back in Tennessee, my CIA paid gynecologist who knew I was under my control covered for my abusers as usual and wrote me a prescription for swelling and pain. I was still in pain and ill from my exposure to Dick Cheney and his high-voltage torture and brutal sex when Houston drove me to Nashville's Stockyard nightclub for a rendezvous with Prince Bandar bin Sultan. A waitress led me to Saudi Arabian ambassador's table where he was drinking with Mayor Fulton, Sheriff Thomas, and Metro Police Chief Joe Casey. I approached him and said, if you please, sir, and meaning Oz, I am under command to deliver a message to you from the Pentagon. There is to be no horseplay, which means sex games. We must get down to business. There was laughter from everyone at the table. I continued, my message is brief, and I only need a moment of your time away from your dinner. The prince's face grew more serious, and we left the table. He touched the waitress's arm, and she pointed to the door across the hall that led to an empty room. We stood just inside the room, and I quickly delivered my pigeon cryptic message. The carrier pigeon, meaning Air Force plane, will take flight and will keep its promise, which means the agreed load, while all transactions, which means both bank and distribution, are procured through the designated diplomatic channels, which is Habib. Your bonus, 1 crystal, 3 cuts await you. The President of the United States gives his word to King Fahd. He told me his driver would meet me out front of the stockyard and instructed me to put the cocaine in the back. I left the building to rejoin Houston at the car. In order that the cocaine could be delivered, a white stretch limousine was pulled up in front of the stockyard. Chief Casey's assigned Metro Police officers guarded the area, and the cocaine was transferred into the back seat of the Prince's limo. Houston and I immediately left the area. My part in Operation Carrier Pigeon was concluded. And then here are 3 footnotes real quick. Richard Fulton and his bank were under federal investigation as of 1991. Fate Thomas is currently serving time in federal penitentiary for bribery and extortion, and then recently under federal investigation for corruption. Done to go, honey. Okay, we're gonna go to Noske. Tell me again. Love you, mean it.